And the beauty of this garden is that it doesn't require a lot of work and it produces a ton of food. It's really a hybrid in between a food garden and a pollinator garden. And I'm gonna give you a tour. It's early spring, we are at the end of May, and this place is just bursting with life and weeds. And I'm gonna clear up a lot of these weeds, and usually it takes about 4 hours every month to bring it back to where a lot of the flowers can thrive without the weeds taking over. And that seems pretty fair to me. 4 hours a month to be able to keep this place. So let's start with the tour here. These are oriental poppies, and you can see, wow, these plants are absolutely beautiful. Really love them. That's a perennial plant. They are almost like half the size of my hand. Really gorgeous flowers. So very excited to see that kind of bloom. And then moving here, we have some daisies, and these guys come back every year. They put up a really nice show. This is some indigo. I cut it back pretty heavily last year. This is Monarda. I do cut back a lot of the Monarda because it tends to choke other plants. This is comfrey going into flower. Those are some beautiful peonies that are also about to bloom. Yarrow, also a perennial. Here we have some lilies getting ready to take off and start blooming. Down here we have a marguerite daisy. The mint and the Monarda really gave it a run for its money, so to speak. This is a lot of mountain mint. And here's a really cool plant that is a Rebecca hortensia. And it's really nice. It grows tall. It will fill these cages. It's nice to see this degree of biodiversity for really not a ton of work. 4 hours a month in the height of the growing season here in the Northeast. That's actually pretty good. But you can see this is quite a beautiful plant. It spreads by rhizomes, but not terribly aggressive. So it's not a mint. So definitely can be controlled. But it has these beautiful yellow flowers early in the spring. And it looks really nice with the daisies. And you can see now the Japanese knotweed in this garden, it's quite an invasive plant. You can see how the whole garden really is encircled by Japanese knotweed. So I will knock that back a little bit today, but I use that as fertilizer, so it's not all bad. And these are peonies. Wow, these peonies are gorgeous. It has quite a lot of flowers, and I'm just very excited to see them. So this is a treat to get to see these plants in full swing. Those are really beautiful plants. This is the bronze fennel. It's also a perennial. It does spread by seed, so you have to be careful if you have it. But wow, this is one of my favorite plants. It creates a lot of habitat for insects, especially the praying mantis. I made other videos where I talk about how the bronze fennel really is like a nursery for praying mantis. And back here you have more comfrey. This is a weed barrier. So the comfrey is what keeps a lot of these really intense Japanese knotweeds and grasses and all kinds of crazy things from going into the garden. And when you go into the garden, there is garlic. You can see there are some weeds, but for the most part, because of the mulching and the weed barrier created by the comfrey, the garden really stays in pretty good shape. You know, for once a month, this is good. And now I have been planting comfrey on the other side to create a double barrier. And what I love about comfrey, obviously, is an amazing green fertilizer, green manure, but it also provides food for pollinators early in the spring because you have all these beautiful blooms. And I'm planting it all around the garden because you can see the areas where I don't have it. A lot of the Japanese knotweeds starts encroaching. Now, the Japanese knotweed is not really pushing into the garden. It's more me pushing the Japanese knotweed out of the garden for the last few years. I have been gardening in this side before we were here. This place was covered with Japanese knotweed, and you can see the difference. You still have some plants popping up, but compared with this, it's huge. And this is an amazing green manure. I would not plant Japanese knotweed if I didn't have it, but I have it. and I love using it as green manure. And we are still early enough in the season that if you harvest it now, you don't have to worry about the plants sprouting in the compost pile. And back here, where I wanted to show you, it's this is rhubarb, and these plants are huge. The leaves are gigantic, and the point of planting rhubarb here is also to prevent Japanese knotweed from taking over the garden. So you can see that the rhubarb really takes over that area. Wow, that plant is gorgeous. It's so huge. It's like probably almost 6 feet going from one side to the other. They will be available for sale once they dry, because there's thousands of seeds. Really, really nice plant to control weeds. If you have an area that you really want to push back the weeds, something aggressive, as aggressive as a Japanese knotweed, you can really push it back with rhubarb, and you get an edible crop, which is really nice to have that dual function. Something that I did on this side, which I have another video, is that I fold the comfrey, and the point of folding the comfrey is to expand the area that it covers as a weed barrier. I'm not folding all of it because I want to leave some of these flowers upstanding. Stems that are flat on the ground, they're going to suppress the weeds, and the plant is going to start producing another crop, another set of leaves. And then here I did the same thing with this Japanese knotweed. I didn't cut them all the way because I'm trying to see if that is going to be effective at suppressing a lot of the grasses under it. And I believe it will, because the Japanese knotweed is pretty persistent and it produces a lot of shade, and the stems are not going to die. So in that position, they're going to block a lot of the really aggressive weeds from getting to this side of the garden. Here are some gooseberries growing on the fence. They do really well if you trellis them, because they're a lot easier to harvest, because they have really pernicious thorns. So if you try to put your hand through a gooseberry bush, you're gonna feel it. But if you trellis it, you kind of guide it through the trellis, the gooseberries become more available. And the interesting thing about these plants is that the birds don't seem to really go after them, and they're really, really sweet. They're way better than a currant, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion. So now inside of the garden, let's actually see the stuff that's growing here. This is a garlic. I've been growing this garlic for almost 10 years now, using the same seed from the same crop. But this year I started doing something different. I allowed some plants to go into bulbils, and then that green stuff that you see in between the leaves, those are garlic plants. I just mulched them. And the point here is that I want to be able to create new garlic seed, to kind of have a new stock from bulbs that were actually pollinated, and they come up. So this year they are going to produce a single bulb, but then next year I'll be able to plant those bulbs. Yacon, this is one of my favorite crops. I have a lot of videos about yacon, and here you see how small it is. And I actually interplant some yacon with garlic, because these plants are going to take a while to really take off, and I will harvest the garlic way before the yacon starts to take over the beds. Really beautiful plant. Wonderful, wonderful plant. Prebiotic. I do have potatoes on this side of the bed, and the things that I grow here are things that don't require a lot of attention. So a lot of my potatoes come from here, and I love these onions, and they produce a lot of food for pollinators. And the good thing about these onions compared to the Egyptian onions, which are right next to it, is that these guys stay soft and tender all year. They don't harden. The Egyptian onions, which are an amazing plant, I just love Egyptian onions, but the stems will become really hard, so you can't really cook with them. But these other onions don't. and they produce a lot of seed, so I spread them by seed. So that is the garden at the end of May. We had a relatively mild winter and a very good spring so far. Not a ton of rain, but just enough rain to keep the garden going without having to water it.